Peace, love, and Reiki. Welcome to Global Reiki webinars. Wow, 43 people immediately as we opened the room. Hello, Jenny. Um, and to everyone else, go ahead and type in, let us know where you're joining us from and say hello. Hello, Todd in Mercer Island, Washington. Hello, Elsa in the Netherlands and Philippe in British Columbia. Phyllis says hello. She's in Spain today. I'm just in my home in Evanston, Illinois, north of Chicago. Good morning, Nadia in Oregon. Hello, Andra. Hello, Jane in Denmark. It's so good to be with you all. Hello, Sylvia in Brazil and Maria in San Francisco. Ooh, now they're coming really quickly. Hello.
Yeah, they are. Wow.
Royal Oak, Michigan, Connecticut. Hello, Eva. Apparently, we're nearby each other physically. It's so good to be with you. So, on this episode of Global Reiki Webinars, we are going to be diving into the topic of how can Reiki become integrated into standard healthcare? And this is a topic that Phyllis and I have been engaged in with smaller groups of people who, in the last 2 years, have signed up for our online intensive from healing practice to professional practice. And there's a group of people who have named themselves the Professional Practice Vision Keepers, who have been talking about this really in depth with us. And I'm really excited to hear an evolved version of what Phyllis has to say on the topic, and also new things, and to respond to all of your questions. This is definitely a topic since we began the Global Reiki Webinar Project that people all over the world are interested in. And I think they're, interested in realizing collectively as a community, because so many of us experience healing with Reiki and are wondering what we can do and how we can be of service in this way. So before I turn it over to Phyllis, who's going to lead us in some Reiki to begin the webinar today, I'm going to share a couple of announcements that those of you live will see some links that I share throughout the webinar. One is our donation link. Global Reiki Webinars is an offering that Usui Shiki Grandmaster Phyllis Furumoto and myself continue to give for the Global Reiki community. It nourishes us emotionally to be here with you and to feel you and be in this community. And also, we really appreciate that many of you also contribute financially to help us pay for the platforms and the expenses that come up as we grow and continue to be of service in this way. And when we're able to also compensate ourselves for our time and energy, it feels great as well. So you'll see that link and know that when you click it, it will open in a different page or window and will not take you away from the webinar. So don't be concerned about that when you see it. And if you are watching us now in the future and YouTube, I'll be sure to include that link in the description below. The second link that you will see is an invitation to take a look at the registration page for the Global Reiki Gathering that will be happening this June in Michigan on June 20th through 24th. This is the second global gathering, and some of you may have noticed that registration was published on Monday of this week. And you also may have noticed that there is a deadline to register by March 30th. And so Phyllis and I wanted to communicate with you so you understand why I decided to do that. And the main reason is because the retreat center needs to know for sure from us if we're going to be there, and if we are, how many lodges we need, and our large lodge, we basically have a requirement of having 20 people registered. And I need to be able to let the retreat center know by the end of this month if we really are going to keep that reservation and be able to fill the lodge. Another thing that is quite different about the gathering in 2018 versus the first gathering that we had in 2017 is that Phyllis, who will be joining us virtually and being present with the group, will not be physically present. And so I think myself, in preparation and leading up to this, I have some fear about, what's going to happen. What is this event if Phyllis is not physically there? Which is why the focus of the event you'll see on the description and on the theme, which is cultivating beloved community, really is on cultivating beloved community, on us building relationships. I think something that's been really profound for me and for many people I've spoken to since doing global Reiki webinars is that there are so many of us sharing really personal experiences as we've been on our own journeys with Reiki all over the world. And there's something really beautiful that happens when we're able to connect and find that we share these really personal experiences. And there's a healing that occurs in that. And also, I believe that this is the first step for us to really build personal relationships and friendships and cultivate community beyond our local community is really the first step in us being able to achieve a global community that really is a network and works collaboratively for all of the things that we are interested in doing together and being of service in the world together um, through Reiki. And so, with that in mind, I'm going to pass it over to Phyllis so that she can talk with us about integrating Reiki into standard healthcare, which I think is a big one. And I think we will need to be able to really work together. And that starts with building relationships. So here's Phyllis, and you'll see that link at some point throughout the webinar.
Thanks, Rachel. And I love the term beloved community. That feels really good to me. And yeah. Well, anyway, I'm sorry not to be there. I'm going to be on a holiday, and it's a very special one. So I just am happy that we get to have technology and I get to see all of your faces for a little while anyway during the weekend. Okay, speaking of beloved community, members, let's join each other in sharing Reiki, the Reiki space by self-treatment. You can put your hands anywhere you want, whatever part of your body feels comfortable and feels like that's where you need to be. Thank you. That was lovely. It was hard to come out of it. All right. Well, it seems that this topic, integrating Reiki into standard healthcare, is a big topic for people. And we're really happy to address it. For me, one of the things that I love about this particular idea, or actually for me, it's a direction that we're moving in, and there's no stopping it. But how can we, so the question for me is, how can we be conscious and how can we prepare for this? And the other concept is that we're leaving the words complementary and alternative behind, and go for a possibility that people, the public and us, would have the conscious choice to choose Reiki for their healthcare, not just immediate care, but for preventative and extending good health into our future. So this means that as a posture, Reiki practice, not Reiki the energy, but Reiki practice, then stands beside the medical community rather than behind it, or perhaps as a rebellious alternative. And as usual, your questions have brought up many aspects of this movement, I will call it, some of which are definitely about communication levels and how to engage someone from another practice. And I would like to just start before I start addressing some of these questions with some basic premise. The first one is that this Reiki practice, whatever our form of practice is and so on, has been brought to us as a folk art. This means for me that it's a practice that has arisen from a need of people in order to survive. So folk arts sometimes have a reputation of being not needed anymore, or outdated, or perhaps a little bit silly. But folk arts are from the basis of our humanity, and I think that they're really, this practice is really important to see. You know, lots of the different other energy modalities, we could call them, also come from folk art, like Chinese herbal medicine and acupuncture, and so on. But the practice of Reiki is growing from a folk art, which is a practice centered on family and friends, to a public practice, which means that people practice and treat people that they aren't connected to through their usual network. And then eventually we're looking at a professional practice. And so I think it's good to keep in mind that this is a progression, and that each of these different forms of practice, folk art, public, and professional practice, have different degrees of characteristic, and have different degrees of training that are necessary. And a lot of what we're going to be talking about today is on the professional level. So perhaps as I speak, you'll kind of get a feeling for the difference between public and a professional level practitioner. And at the same time, the folk art needs to grow and be nourished in order for that to remain our foundation, because each of the practitioners who are either on a public practice or in a professional practice, they also have their own personal practice, which is that folk art. And through the questions, I came up with another question. which is how do we prepare for these professional relationships? And this seems like a great lead in to go to the first question that you asked.
Great. The first question came from Kathy. And Kathy wrote, I wonder about standards of care for practitioners entering standard healthcare. There are many schools and lineages of Reiki. What are your thoughts? For example, if someone sees a GP, general practitioner, they have a general idea about the education behind them. Same with any specialist.
Right. So, Kathy, this was a great question, and it's a dream that I've shared with many people, and I am hoping that this year is one more step toward this. Um, for a public practitioner, there are lots of programs that give a practitioner um, the education that they need to step from a folk art to a public practice. And one of these actually is the massage training, which there's a question down the line here about why become a massage therapist when you don't really want to practice massage, you want to practice Reiki. And part of that is because you have to take certain educational requirements that are appropriate for a public practitioner, even if it's not massage but Reiki. So then we enter the standard of care for practitioners, and I see these as professionals. So I'm really, ideally, what I'd love to see for the practice that I hold and for actually all of Reiki is like a 3-year residential program where practitioners come, they already have a number of years of practice under their belt. They want to take on a professional practice. So they would come and have very deep instruction in Reiki practice, in where Reiki takes us, in all these different levels. Of course, anatomy and physiology, business aspects of having a professional practice, and so on. So, and at the same time, they would also have the stipulation to receive Reiki for every day for a certain amount of time, maybe a year or something, and see what that's like for them. And then at the end, they would have internships into different specializations. So I'm just thinking of like geriatrics, drug and alcohol treatment centers, brain damage, Reiki for childhood illnesses, these kinds of things. And I feel like this is really, I'd love to think that this was the future. So, and then the medical community, well, the public in general, would really see and feel that they have been educated and embody a kind of standard of care that we expect from our healthcare systems. Thanks.
Great. Philippe wrote, what is standard healthcare? And it asks, what can Reiki do for me?
Yeah, so good question, Philippe. Well, in our vernacular, when we made up the title of this particular thing, it says, what is standard healthcare? And you ask, and what I meant by standard healthcare is the things that we take for granted, almost like medical facilities, hospice, dental care, and so on. It's like a whole range of what we, quote, normally imagine being a part of our personal health care. And the question, what can Reiki do for me, if you were standard healthcare, is that it could allow the care to become more patient oriented. I think this is the lingo for this particular direction that a lot of nurses and doctors and dentists and assistants and so on are really going for, is something to make the care personalized. Also, it just, Reiki treatments for me lie down a fundamental overall benefit of increased possibility for healing. And so anything that I'm doing in my healthcare, I feel like is supported by Reiki, whether I go to a periodontist and have a tooth pulled, or I'm going to my oncologist to take care of a cancer condition, or I go to my general practitioner because I can't sleep. All of these are affected by my general well-being, and also by this foundation that Reiki gives me in insight, and also in raising my own standard of care. So I hope that makes sense to you, Philippe. And some of what Reiki can do for me is I don't have articulation for. So that's one of my homeworks. Thank you.
Great. After your response to Kathy's question, Sharon wrote, professional providers have licenses by professional boards. Are you seeking this? And
I'm I'm sorry. Can you I'm sorry, Rachel. Can you say this again?
Yes. Sharon wrote, professional providers have licenses by professional boards. Are you seeking this? And my thought is sort of like to add on and to clarify what you were describing in Kathy's question about what were her words, standards of care. That the vision is that there will be at some point this level of Reiki practice called professional practice that does include some standard training that would be on par with other kinds of professional boards, but it would be a Reiki board, not having the hospitals or the other organizations define for us what that training is, but that it's not simply becoming initiated and practicing the folk art, that there are other elements that that a professional receives that would be part of this. Is that?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Sharon, let us know if that answers your question. The next question that came in advance was from Liliana, who said, why, when is a chronic disease, Reiki does not work?
Okay, good question. So, it's not my experience that Reiki doesn't work with chronic diseases. And then and so that's just my experience. And I don't want to go into experiential stories, but I think this is true for most everybody online and for those of you who will work. But the real question is, what does it mean that Reiki does not work? Reiki often does not give the person, like myself, or the person that I'm treating, what they expect. But Reiki always moves people through their healing process, which a chronic disease is a kind of symptom of that healing process. And so I really believe that and know that Reiki does always work. It just doesn't work the way we expect, which is a little difficult for some of the other healthcare professionals who really like to predict what their methodology or their care form can do. But no one, no one has 100% predictability. So, this is a great question. And it comes into the question before, what can Reiki do for me? But then there's another question coming from us is, what are we offering? And this is a great question with lots of hours of concentrated contemplation. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is from Irina. And Irina wrote, do you know something about Reiki and healthcare in Italy? Living here, I see that only volunteering projects have been done. I would be very grateful to know something more about Reiki practitioner as an official profession.
Yes, so this is a point, I think, not only in Italy, but in all over the world. And because we are not yet really accepted so much as a public practice, much less a professional practice, and we don't even have the training in place to and the board certification to have a professional Reiki practitioner. There isn't anything as such an official profession. And I think this is where we're going. And these conversations like this are great places to get our minds and our hearts and our bodies ready for what's next. So, and I don't know anything about Reiki and healthcare in Italy. Sorry. Thank you.
The next question is from Todd, who I know is with us live, and he wrote, how do we move past the woo-woo effect to establish credibility? Since science has yet been unable to define Reiki, that would have a physically measurable aspect. Is anecdotal evidence sufficient to become an accepted part of mainstream or standard healthcare practices?
Well, Todd, I loved your first question. How do we move past the woo-woo effect to establish credibility? The most important thing for me in this is us. We have to be credible. So, one of the things that's very important is for serious Reiki practitioners who are public practitioners to take themselves seriously, to establish their own individual credibility. And this will create a kind of, if we want to call it, field of energy of credibility, because once we get up into offering a professional standard program, then the public practitioners will have to want that. In other words, they'd have to sign up for it and support that. And that's something that is not very popular, I will use that word, popular, in our Reiki community. Mostly, I think people think that if they've taken first and second degree and even are a Reiki master, that's enough to become a public practitioner, which is not for me. Because it can be, but those public practitioners who really have credibility are people who have taken training in other professions, um, and use that credibility behind their Reiki practice, like nurses, physical therapy therapists, massage therapists, counselors, psychologists, and sometimes doctors. So we need to be able to establish individual credibility, and that means when we start treating the public, that we as a public practitioner have a place either outside our home, or if it's inside our home, that it's really clearly only used for practice, for the practice, that they have a regular fee schedule, that they are very clear about interviews and wanting to be clear about what they offer and so on. So it's credibility comes from us. It for me, it doesn't come from science. And science, I don't know if it's true that it has yet to define Reiki, maybe as a energy, but Reiki as a practice is very important. And there have been wonderful, real scientific, following all the protocols for scientific experiments. What's it called? Oh, research, scientific research, following all the protocols that have really been wonderful. And it's not anecdotal, it's actually measurable physiological differences. And a couple of those that I have seen have been done by a doctorate student in Brazil. And I see that Sylvia is from Brazil and has mentioned that Reiki and some other integrative healthcare, well, I wouldn't say integrative healthcare, yes, are a part of the official healthcare system now. So this is very new and very exciting because it gives you this process by which other countries can come up against, and I'm very happy. And he said, this doctorate student who's now a doctor, he said that Reiki is the second largest choice, second most popular choice behind allopathic medicine for healthcare in Brazil. And I believe that this is why this part of legislation was actually passed. So it's very exciting, and we'll see what happens.
Great.
And Todd, I notice you have credibility versus credentials. I don't really know what that means.
I
Yeah.
think he sent that when you were talking about people, Reiki practitioners in public practice who have really earned credibility, have some other kind of professional training that grants them the credibility versus credentials. I'm not sure what he means by credentials.
Yeah, but honestly, Todd, I've gone to doctors who are not credible, and they have all the paper. Credibility for me is not something that comes from proof. It comes from being congruent, being ethical, being clear about what you offer, and being able to fulfill that, and to have honesty in our practice in that sense. So let's go to the next question and see where we go from here. But great question.
The next question
Yeah, go ahead.
came from Sue Ann. And Sue Ann wrote, "What do you see as the greatest obstacle to this occurring in today's healthcare climate? From my research, there are approximately 20% of US hospitals with some form of Reiki program for inpatient or outpatient care. The programs I am aware of are offered as volunteer service in the hospital or at a nominal fee for outpatient, so cost isn't necessarily a barrier."
Well, the greatest obstacle is the Reiki community's process in understanding that we make our own credibility. And once we do this, I'm totally um, convinced and trust that we will, as a community, move toward fulfilling what we need to do in order to have all the other things that may support us. Um, I have a feeling that even that as a folk art, volunteer service or a nominal fee for an outpatient is appropriate. And cost is not something that I'm concerned with when I have a serious condition of my body or in my psychology. So what I want to do is to be able to, and as a, sorry, erase that, and as a, mm, in another way, the cost is really reflecting often the level of training, we could call it, or experience that the person has. Right now, we only see the cost climbing as people become public practitioners. And I really like the confidence of somebody who um, asks the money that they need in order to live. So this is really important. Uh, but the credibility of that Reiki practitioner also rises. So this is what we call the higher standard of care. So the higher the standard of care, the greater the cost. And this will come in again later. So I'd like to just leave this question for now and go on to some of the other questions that came up about cost. Thanks.
Great. I keep having thoughts that I want to add
Yeah,
to
go for
also,
it.
but I also am so like enjoying just hearing where you're taking us, and I
Uh,
imagine our community is as well. So I'm just going to go on to Lee's question.
okay.
And Lee wrote, "I gave a talk and demonstration on Reiki in medical settings 1.5 years ago at UCLA Grand Rounds. Feedback was amazing and session recorded. How do I move from there to bringing Reiki into one of their departments? When I proposed that, never got a response back."
Well, here's where contact is so important. Like having a personal contact with somebody who actually works in the UCLA hospitals and being able to, have personal credibility. This is again this credibility thing, like personal contact that says, yes, this person is for real. I'd like to recommend that he be given some kind of place for Reiki in one of our departments and so on. So, I'd love to hear the session. Is there any way, Lee, that you could share that session with me? Because um, in the group that's really working on professional, Reiki as a professional practice, we that would be really great for us to listen together. And maybe have you join us. So, but I really encourage you to seek one person who can move you through that. Thanks.
And Lee, you can contact both of us through Reiki webinars at gmail.com.
Right.
I monitor that email address and forward on to Phyllis everything that is for her or for both of us. So the next question came from Jean, and Jean wrote, in highly regulated states, such as Florida, where I hear Reiki is incorrectly considered a form of massage and therefore requires licensing, even thought becoming a licensed massage therapist is not an
Even
option,
though,
even though,
sorry, typo.
yeah, being a licensed massage therapist is not an option or goal. Many of us become ordained as interfaith ministers and then offer Reiki services as a spiritual practice. Please speak to the validity of offering services in this manner when most of the clients I see come to me seeking balance and healing for a variety of medical conditions.
Well, it's interesting because for me, the word healing, especially since I've been practicing Reiki, um, uh, includes our understanding of our spirituality as a human being. So I don't know what this phrase means, validity of offering services in this manner. Personally, what's happening in the Scandinavian countries is that Reiki is practice is being considered as a healing, like a kind of healing spirituality. So that's they have made the combination of Reiki being in hospitals and other medical facilities, we could say legal, because they see it as a spiritual practice. And I don't see any problem with that, because I know that, for instance, my cancer condition came from my own understanding of my spirit, as well as physical conditions and emotional conditions. So I think that interfaith ministers and offering Reiki services like that are really are fine, and it doesn't address the professional practice question. Maybe it kind of sidesteps it, and that's okay also, especially in today's climate. um, I don't I don't think that many states actually consider Reiki a form of massage, but that's the only place it fits. So I know in Washington State, for instance, for the last, I don't know, 30 years or so, you've had, or maybe more, you've had to have, in theory, to be a Reiki public practitioner, you needed to have a massage license. And part of that is, I read some of the chat, is about being able to touch. But a lot of the licensing piece is really about the other courses that the massage therapist has to take in order to know where their boundary is between what they do and what they can't do. And I think that it's because we don't have our own, then we have to borrow from other people. And this particular question, Jean, that you've raised is exactly that. So, we can complain about it, but until we have our own, I think that, you know, these people are doing us a favor, actually. Thanks.
Thanks. And I will add that it's similar to some of the personal experiences that I have been thinking about through this discussion of, like, with credentials, I hold a license in teaching. And when I became a Reiki master and began teaching Reiki, there was that sort of gave me this confidence that beyond having, practicing Reiki at this level, I felt like it was okay for me to teach or offer workshops that, you know, deal with things that I continue to learn through my practice with Reiki. And also, a lot of, in the beginning, you were talking about receiving other kinds of training in order to really be in public practice. And over the last handful of years, it's been important for me to seek and receive training in business. And a lot of the people who are offering training, business training for people, offering workshops or one-on-one services, are, at least in my experience, are very much in this realm of life coaching and personal development, um, and like coaching me to coach others, which has been sort of like, there's part of it that feels empowering, that I understand this business model and I have this training to, like, offer spiritual mentorship or counseling is what feels more comfortable to me rather than.
Mm.
And also sometimes I do feel, is this an added credential? Is this taking me away from what my original intent was, which was to offer Reiki and be in greater service as a Reiki master. Um, so I appreciate hearing you, Phyllis, say that, they're doing us a favor because it is helping us to be of service. We don't have such a thing for our own community.
Right. Mm-hmm.
The next question came from Steve, and Steve wrote, I volunteer at Banner Estrella Medical Center in Phoenix, Arizona. I am working at getting other hospitals in the area to allow Reiki and guided imagery as alternative treatments. It appears to me that the administration of these medical facilities want proof that it works. I have testimonials from patients, but they seem to doubt or question the documents. Any suggestions to open their minds?
Um, Steve, I'm not really quite clear about what your purpose is of allowing Reiki and guided imagery as alternative treatments. And when you say that, I wonder about what is it that you're being an alternate for? And so this would appear to me to set you up for the medical facilities that want proof that it will actually serve as an alternative treatment. So I don't know if I would go down that road, because the testimonials from patients, they need to back their recommendation of Reiki with saying, well, you could take an aspirin or for your headache, or you could have a Reiki treatment. And they need to know that both of these are analgesics. So I think that that's some place to kind of be clear about what are you offering, and what is it that where is the place that you want Reiki and guided imagery to be in these hospitals. And what I would do, actually, if I were you, is to sit down with a couple of three people that you have, a way to have conversation with and say, look, this is what my experience is with Reiki. This is what my experience is with guided imagery. Where do you see in your service, in your client care, these would fit in? So ask them where to fit in rather than trying to figure out where you fit in. That's a great idea too, and a great way to start conversation. And let me know, because I live south of Tucson, so I'd love to connect with you. Thanks.
I also know a Reiki master who is completing a nursing program in Phoenix. Will be licensed quite soon, and you might want to connect. So if you do, send an email to reikiwebinars@gmail.com, and I'd love to help you connect.
Great. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, the next question came from Melissa. And Melissa wrote, I'd love to learn more about presenting or speaking about Reiki to those in a traditional Western medical role, doctors, etc. What tops or what are best practices do you have to encourage curiosity and open-minded responses?
Oh, I think it's what tips. Sorry, I did this when I was half asleep typing these questions back, so I've made a few errors this time. Um, you know, open-minded responses are not that great. So there's something about this theme that is now occurring as I hear the questions. And, curiosity, yes. Open-minded, it's up to us to open their minds, because you don't have to go to their mind. You can go to their heart. And like, for instance, there was this man that I knew really well, and he cut off his finger, and we went to the hospital, to the emergency room, and with the part of his finger, and he was trying to decide whether or not that they would have enough time to sew the finger back on, and he would have to be flown to another hospital about an hour away in order to do this, and so on. And we were just going back and forth, and there was another person there who was giving Reiki. And while she was given Reiki, the anesthetic that he applied to his finger would just disappear after a few minutes. So finally, he said, there's something weird going on here. And so we asked the person to stop doing Reiki for a while. So that happened. And then when he finally cleaned the wound and everything, there was this whole conversation about whether to, try to sew the finger back on and so on. And then during the healing, so we decided not to. And during the healing of his wound on his finger, there were some really interesting things that happened. And this doctor just got very curious about what we were doing and what this Reiki stuff was. And his curiosity led him, to us having a talk. Now, he, to my knowledge, at that point anyway, didn't take Reiki, but it allowed him to see that there was some effect that Reiki was having that he couldn't have predicted any other way. And, you know, in talking to other doctors, there was this wonderful place where their hearts were touched. In other words, they saw that their patients were more at ease after their surgery, didn't have as much need for anesthetic after surgery, and these kind of things. And so it really allows people to be interested. And what you need to do is to not be selling Reiki, but to be sharing and engaging them in a discussion about patient care, not about how valuable Reiki could be to them. So this is my best tips. Thanks.
The next question came from Pauline, and Pauline wrote, "What influence will this have on the spiritual practice?"
Well, Pauline, I would have loved to have a few more sentences from you. But this is how I see it. My practice of Reiki includes the healing practice, spiritual discipline. It is my spiritual practice. Personal development, like emotional stability, and just development as a human being. And then a mystic order, which means that I really see myself as a part of one. And this came to me through my folk art practice. And my folk art practice is very important for me. And this needs not to go away from the public practitioners or the professional practitioners. This needs to be our basis, our foundation of practice. And one of the things that is really important to me is that we don't compromise or give any of this up in order to be integrated into standard healthcare. And I believe that we can do this. We just have to not be afraid to have a spiritual practice. One of the things that I really loved when I was in my early days of being a Reiki master is that I lived in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I went in several times into the hospital to treat people, that I knew that wanted to have Reiki. And one of the things that happens in this hospital in Santa Fe is that from day one, when they opened their doors, they had a lot of patients that were Native Americans. And, they had their own very clear spiritual practice, spirituality. And so the medicine men would come into the hospital or, some other practice, and they would, be fine with that. So it's really important that we not lose the foundation of this whole practice, which is, for many of us, a spiritual practice. Thanks.
I just stopped in the middle of responding to a chat. Ram asked, "What is pro card or folk art?" And so I wanted to clarify. Phyllis is saying folk art,
Yes,
which
sorry.
to Reiki, which is folk art means something that happens just within communities, but not for money. It's just a thing that people do to feel good. Is that, I don't know how to define folk art.
Uh-huh. So folk arts come from uh, a group of people needing to have something in order to survive. Um, like, for instance, we can use Chinese herbology, the Chinese herbal practice. All of that whole huge uh, library of knowledge that the Chinese herbalists carry with them happen because over the thousands of years they've seen a condition, they found an herb or a plant or a mix that will change the balance of the body and have an effect on these symptoms. So that's a folk art. And that's exactly what Reiki is. That, you know, we all have it, we practice it because we need it to survive on all these different levels, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, and as a community, as as humanity. So this for me is a folk art, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's free, but it means that, you know, we practice, like for instance, in our local communities, in our tribes, in our family and friends, as we said. And public practice is when Reiki, a folk art practitioner, goes out and has enough confidence to start treating people that they don't know, that they have no connection to. And as a professional, it would mean being hired by healthcare facilities to practice Reiki. This is very simplistic, but you kind of get a feeling for it.
Great. Thank you for clarifying. Our next question is from Hawazen, and Hawazen wrote, I notice some people, even after having Reiki and they love it, still complain about their health or not doing their treatment to get better and heal. How can we make a balance between Reiki and healthcare at the same time?
Huh. So with this question, it's a huge leap for me between Reiki and healthcare on the level that we're speaking about it today. But if I would include the word individual healthcare, then I can answer this question. So that's what I'm going to do. Um, you know, like anything else, uh, Reiki might make them feel good. But some people really love talking about their health. Whether they're complaining about it or not, I don't know. And sometimes it sounds like they're complaining, but they're not really. And sometimes they don't do treatment because it's just not their priority. And it's really important not to judge people about this. Like, for instance, you know, I'm always talking about losing weight, but I still eat chocolate. I mean, you know, it's the same thing. I know what I need to do to lose weight. That I'm not doing that means that I'm doing something else and I'm taking care of another part of myself. And so I just need to be clear and try not to complain about not losing weight, if that makes sense. So, what Reiki treatments do for me in this particular uh, scenario is that it allows me to go deeper and to choose myself before I choose to be upset by somebody else. So I just think that it's a really important thing to know that we all have the tools at in our choice basket. You know, we all have what we need right in front of us, and sometimes we don't make the choice to do that. And I actually can't tell you why, except that it's an amazing process about life.
Cool.
Uh, thank you.
The next question is from Lori, and Lori wrote, when I enter a hospital or other medical facility to give a Reiki treatment, what legal issues do I need to be aware of? What benefits or protection does carrying a minister's card offer?
Um, I will, Lori, answer this question totally generally because I can't answer locally. So if you really want to know about this, you need to go, to the medical facility and ask, or uh, go to an attorney. However, what's really important when we enter a hospital or a hospice or a dental office or a psychiatric hospital or whatever is that this is their domain. We we aren't guests. We are guests there. And so it's very important to respect their way of doing things. So we may not like the diagnosis. We may not like some of their treatments, but that's totally not our business because we're there to give a Reiki treatment. We're not there to rewrite the treatment schedule. So you need to be respectful of the treatment that they are being given. You need to be respectful of the people who are offering that treatment, like nurses and so on. And you need to be aware that they have their own job description that they need to do. So, when we were in the hospital and I was with my mother who was dying at the time, people came in every hour to take her vital signs. And though it sometimes felt like interference with our space and with the Reiki, I really needed to just let them do it because that they were taking care of their job and their responsibility. So this is what I mean by respect. Um, of course, we never in Reiki diagnose. We don't promise or give people expectation about what Reiki benefit will happen. And these are the two big things that you need to be aware of because whether you carry a minister's card or not, telling someone that you can cure their cancer with Reiki is really a no-no. And, there's nothing that can protect you from the results of that if the cancer isn't cured, as it were. So, I feel that a minister's card in some states, mostly allows benefit of being able to lay your hands on the people without any question. But honestly, I've never run into this problem myself, and I've been into lots of hospitals. Maybe I've just been lucky. But anyway, uh, you could also ask an attorney about that as well if you are looking at a um, local facilities in your area.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. And my understanding is that in general, um, when we're engaging in relationships with people that involve a financial exchange, that there is a liability of risk if someone has a bad experience, if someone gets injured falling off a Reiki table or feels confused after a session. There's, a practitioner does have those liabilities. I don't know of any Reiki practitioner who's ever actually been sued or had that kind of a thing, but the my understanding is that a professional standard is to have some kind of insurance policy. And I know many people in public practice who do, and I know many people in public practice who do not. And that's what I know regarding that. The next question came from Scott. And I'm also looking at the time. We have a number of questions that came in, and I didn't even look at any questions that were submitted this morning on our list, but it does look like we'll need to stop at some point, so I'll stop talking and read the next question, which was from.
Great.
And he said, I have always thought of Reiki as a method for moving humanity forward and transporting us into realms outside of power and control systems. In the United States right now, healthcare is so managed, overpriced, underdelivered, portioned, and imposed. Why would we ever want to be a part of such a power system? How can we use Reiki to change the monster and not be absorbed by it?
Well, I thought this was a wonderfully provocative question, Scott, and really a good one. And it's not just in the United States. I think that healthcare globally is managed, mostly overpriced and underdelivered and portioned. I don't I don't know what that means, portioned, but then I think, well, maybe it's just because a portion of the community gets to have access to a drug or access to you know, a kind of treatment, and another portion doesn't, and imposed. Um, well, in my Reiki practice, what I've learned is that if I wanted to change the monster in me, I had to become a part of that monster. I had to be able to own it, to understand it, and then to not be changed by it, but to actually be able to um, become a part of it so that I can make different choices. And I believe that this is also true. And I, I really appreciate your thought, and it'll be our challenge not to be absorbed by it, not to be influenced by it, not to be eaten up by it, but to actually change the monster into something that feels like it has humanity and has caring. And there are a lot of people, the people who are in and are caregivers, are really facing this question themselves now. So maybe as Reiki moves into the healthcare system, we can actually support the people who are providing healthcare. Thanks.
Thank you. The next question came from Jody. And Jody wrote, I would love to see this create full-time jobs for Reiki practitioners. Is that a possibility?
I'd love to have lots of Reiki practitioners have full-time jobs. But, what's really important is not to see this as a cool job opportunity, but to see that we are willing to work for, get educated for, be prepared for, being able to deliver a kind of care to humanity, to individuals, and to humanity as a whole that is unique to our Reiki practice. So, yes, a possibility and hopefully a probability. Thank you.
Great. The next question is from Svetlana. And Svetlana wrote, I would be happy if this Reiki was recognized as a healing medicine and most people learned about it and got a cure. Also, know that as in Russia, where I live, so in America, it is not profitable for the state because the state takes money from medicines and it has developed over the years. I do not know how we can change the system itself.
Hi, Svetlana. Um, I really know what you mean by this, and what I'd also like to do is kind of use the word healing instead of cure because just of my semantics. Um, the pharmaceuticals are huge, and and in our case in the United States, it's not about the state, it's about the corporations who sell the medication and make huge profits. Um, I don't know if we can change the system, but I know that I have the possibility to be able to use the system as I so choose. And one of the things that has happened for me is that, you know, if there's a medication that costs an amount of money that I don't want to pay, then I don't use it. I feel that it's important for us to look at what the limitation is for healing or for cure. Like, you know, I've had my oncologist um, offer me something that I probably could get funding for it somehow in my personal life, but I don't want to because this is just not what I want to. I don't want to empower the pharmaceutical corporations for keeping doing this. So I've done other things in order to either have the medication or not take the medication at all. Um, and when I made that decision, I made it knowing that it could shorten my life. It could, I could have other things develop because I didn't take the medication, but it was okay for me. So the limitation is about our way of using pharmaceuticals, for instance, is that I have to make a conscious choice about what I'm willing to to have or have not, what I'm willing to spend my money on or not, and what my limitations of life are or not. And these kinds of decisions are conscious decisions that Reiki as a practice and Reiki treatments for me gave me the courage to make. And I want that to happen for everyone because I feel that it's a way for us to not take so many medications or not take medications at all if we so choose. So I have some friends who have cancer and they chose not to do any medical treatment at all. No operation, no chemotherapy, no anything. They just did Reiki. And for them, they wanted to live and be consistent with their own value system no matter what. And they knew that this may change, that this may mean that they die sooner than if they had had medical intervention. And that was totally okay for them. And I really honor their way of being. Yeah. So I appreciate what you're saying, and changing the system, I don't think so, not right now. But maybe if more of us take the opportunity to make conscious choices about how we use the system for benefit for ourselves, then the system will start adjusting. Who knows? Thank you.
Thank you. We have time for one more.
Oh, really? We have so many more questions.
We'll do the next one and see where we're at. The
All
next
right.
question came from Judith, and Judith wrote, to become integrated into standard healthcare, It is essential that Reiki is recognized as an insurable service by insurance companies. This suggests a great deal of infrastructure must be in place first, whereby Reiki practitioners have met standards and are registered members of a professional organization to support their practice, and therefore many years or even decades before complete integration is possible globally. Do you foresee any shortcuts?
No shortcuts here. Judith, I I guess that it's essential that Reiki is recognized as an insurable service. Um, and what's happening in Great Britain is really exciting because over the years, the Reiki community there has come together, has created a definition of a Reiki treatment from all these different forms of Reiki that have been, that have put input into it and, back this definition. Then it's gone to another group of Reiki people who have conversation with the government and with the healthcare system there, and they're working on creating the standards and the understanding of what professional organization they need to support their practice and so on. So there's not a shortcut, but there is this idea that we can't wait around for somebody else to do it for us. We have to be proactive. And those of us who are interested in having the emergence of uh, uh, professional health, professional Reiki care, and public practice, um, then we need to just step up and be a part of getting together, starting the conversation anywhere in the world. So I think that shortcuts, no, but getting started, it's essential. Thanks. I think it's a good place to end, Rachel.
Thank you. And I'll share regarding insurance with my
Sure.
personal experience in the US is there is a Reiki organization that I actually became a member of for 2 years for the sole purpose of having access to an insurance policy that was available to members. And then as the kinds of things that I was doing in my business expanded, I just contacted insurance agents who had offices in my area and told them, these are all the things I do, including seeing seeing people for Reiki treatments on a table. No, I don't manually manipulate muscles, but it does involve touch, and just explained everything that I do. And these agents worked with underwriters to come up with different policies. And then I chose the one that was most affordable. But I think, especially if you are in public practice and are wanting this, insurance companies want your business and are, my experience is they were really willing to work with me to make something
Right.
that worked.
I thought that, well, that's one aspect of insurance. But I thought that what she was actually referring to was that in an insurance policy, that our health insurance policy would pay for Reiki treatments.
Ah,
It's the
yes.
other way, it's the other aspect. So
Yeah.
both are important. And actually, 10 years ago, or maybe 15 years ago, that wouldn't have been so easy for you. So there's progress being made.
Yeah.
And that's great.
Yeah.
Super. All right. I will answer the rest of the questions in the Global Reiki Webinar Facebook page. And thank you all so much for your questions. They were fabulous. And I can't wait to have another conversation like this.
Yeah, me too. And for those of you, if you did submit a question through the webinar registration this morning, I'll be sure to send those over to Phyllis so that she
Oh,
can
yeah, you.
do them and put some energy and thought into as well. So, in a moment, we're going to close with Reiki. 222 here in Michigan, says Will. And I just, for those of you who are with us live, I put the gathering registration page up again just a moment ago. And if you are interested in this, really the deadline is to make sure that we know we have our group gathered. So if you're interested, please contact me. Let me know if you have questions, if you have restraints that, you know, we could potentially address to make it possible for you to be there. If you know you're coming and you have Reiki colleagues or friends that you would want to attend with you, start talking to them. And I'm available and happy to talk with you. And there are people who are working with me on creating this beloved community experience, and they would be available to work with you as well. We really want to just cultivate community. So um, with that, oh, I'm seeing other chat that came in. So we can stay online and take a look at that. We always keep the chat open after we close. But for now, let's close with Reiki, either self treatment in whatever way that feels comfortable, or if it is within your practice to send distance Reiki, I invite you to send Reiki to our collective higher. Peace, love. Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone. Bye bye.